In this video, I will demonstrate how you can use SCP and SFTP to transfer files between computers. I have a Linux terminal on my left, which is a Raspberry Pi, and a Mac terminal on my right. I would touch a pi.txt on the desktop of Raspberry Pi, and the mac.txt on the desktop of my Mac. Now I want to transfer the mac.txt to the Raspberry Pi with SCP. So the command is SCP, the file name, and pi at IP address, then column, then the destination path, which is desktop. So the file is transferred. If we check on the Raspberry Pi, we see the mac.txt file. Now what if we want to download the pi.txt from the Raspberry Pi? We do the same thing, except we reverse the order. So pi at IP address, then the file path on the target, then local address. We have downloaded the pi.txt. Now suppose I want to transfer a folder to the Raspberry Pi. I will make a directory and move the txt files into the directory. Then I use the same command to transfer the dir directory to Raspberry Pi. This will fail because dir is not a regular file, it's a directory. So instead, we should use the -r option to copy the files recursively. Now if we check Raspberry Pi, we see that the directory is transferred. Next, I will introduce SFTP. SFTP is SSH File Transfer Protocol, and I will be using an app called Cyberduck to transfer the files with SFTP. So you can open a connection. The server would be the IP address. SFTP uses port 21, and you need to select SFTP. Username is pi. I have no password. Instead, I will use SSH private key. Connect. Then we are in the file system. From the desktop, we can see the files we transferred to the Raspberry Pi. I will delete the directory and the mac.txt. I will do the same thing again, but with a graphical interface. We verify from the terminal that we only have one file on the desktop. Then with the graphical interface, we can simply drag the file into the Raspberry Pi, and the file will be transferred with SFTP. We can verify that the mac.txt is indeed transferred. And I will remove the pi.txt from Mac and download it again using SFTP. With the graphical interface, it's much easier to interact with the files. In the next video, I will talk about Samba, which you can use to turn your Raspberry Pi into a network drive, and you can use your phone to upload and download from the drive.